Um, Reeves has built an internationally recognized engineering business that started in traditional fashion in the garage behind the house in Old Lyme, Connecticut. So don't hate him for that. Despite not being an engineer, and despite nearly being a broke race car driver, and despite being disqualified after winning the national championship in Formula V, Reeves' career hit a convenient nexus between building elegant turbocharger systems and the surprising power they produced. Today, the client roster for Callaway cars includes every automobile manufacturer on the planet, with the exception of the Koreans. Their specialty is engineering specialist model power improvements that feature compliance with emission regulations as well as full warranty coverage. You may know or may not know that the twin-turbo Callaway GTV6s had factory warranties from Alfa. Their primary client today is General Motors, for whom they produce a remarkable series of supercharged vehicles across the entire models lines of Corvette, Camaro, Silverado, Tahoe, Suburban, GMC, and Cadillac. All are available through the GM system, all are financeable, and all are covered by warranty. They are the only such organization in the GM family. Reeves credits the work in producing the Alfa GTV6 twin turbo with being the introductory factor in the gestation of the General Motors relationship. He is here today to tell us the details. Please join me in welcoming Reeves Callaway.
Thanks, everybody. Ooh, is that loud enough?
Oh,
I can hear you. Good, good. You know, it's really a pleasure to speak to people who love their cars, do a lot of work on the cars themselves, know how the car operates and what makes it operate better. So thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. This is not my normal sort of engineering talk. This is my enthusiast talk. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to sort of divide the history up into before Alfa, Alfa, after Alfa. So you can see that my whole outlook is sort of Alfa-centric. You know, I was well, I'm just going to start the show and we're going to comment over the slides. A couple of things though. As you're listening, you'll probably come up with some questions. We're going to make this part of it short and go fast and leave about the half of the presentation to a discussion about what you would like to speak about. I always find that the fascinating aspect of these presentations. So think about anything that you want to ask, because there'll be an opportunity as soon as we get through some of the printed material. So my name is Reeves Callaway. I was very much devoted to seeing if I could become world champion. And of course, you know what an outrageous position that is for a young man to take. But I do have to credit the desire to become involved at the top level of motorsports with at least having done one good thing, besides making me broke. It was that it taught me all of the important aspects about car building, engine design, chassis development, race car engineering, and how to run an international race team that could do something like win Le Mans. All good car manufacturers have to test their mettle, spelled the other way, against each other. And that's a very valid form of testing, as a lot of people in this room know. So here we are, 45, 50 years later, and the dream of being world champion has receded. But it has been a fascinating set of opportunities that are really encouraged only by luck and timing, because there's no way that you can make this stuff up. And as we go through some of the presentation, I think you'll wind up seeing what I mean. So, let me start. There we go. Look at that. Okay. So here's Reeves. Here's Reeves in the early days, trying to be a race car driver. If you want to be a race car driver, the best place that you can possibly be is working for the company that makes the race cars. And if you do have any glimmer of talent, they might let you off for the weekend to go race the car that you're building during the week and be your own best salesman, as well as maybe win a race or two. So Autodynamics in Boston, just north of Boston, was the America's largest producer of race cars. Formula Vs, Formula Super Vs, Formula Fords, Can-Am cars, Formula 5000 cars, everything but Indian Formula 1. Carl Haas told me one day, because we were the distributor for Hewlett and Lola, he comes into the shop, he's got a big cigar, and he says, Reeves, one piece of advice. Make sure you make a little something on everything that you give away.
He always had a big cigar.
Yeah, he always had a big cigar. So, back of the house, 1977. There wasn't enough electricity in the town of Old Lyme to power the machines that we needed.
Oh, wow.
I told the electric company we needed three-phase power, and we were way off the road. And they looked it up on the map, they called me back and said, Mr. Callaway, if you were going to build a public school out there, we wouldn't run power. Every time you build a shop, you think, oh, this is going to be plenty big enough. Right?
Yeah.
And about a year later, you say, what was I thinking? Yeah. So dealing with the problems of working out of the house is this kind of stuff. Notice that those are all 6 Series BMWs in the snow. Does anybody know what a Gravely is? Yeah. It was a machine that could throw you over the handlebars if the snowblower ran into a rock. Does anybody know Walker Evans? Walker Evans, the premier American photographer. Let us now praise famous man. This was Walker's house. That's a different story. So eventually the snow goes away, and this is what the honest to God real roots of this little business were. The only reason that we moved to a larger facility was because with so many people coming to work in the house every day, the septic tank was bubbling out of the ground. Plus, if you're a tool maker and a machinist and a fabricator, and you want a really nice workshop, you can't really do it at home. You have to build So I didn't even remember this was in. But our machinist was a great cartoonist. This is his idea of humor. But this is what you want. So 5 miles away in Old Lyme, Connecticut, we built this, which we always named the Sony Clock Radio. Because we really like to be neat, organized, beautifully crafted, and this represented us much better. But we did it so that we could do volume production of specialist conversions of cars. Volkswagen was a new client. All the German cars seemed to have enough engineering headroom to be able to get a reasonable dose of more horsepower without failing. So Volkswagen was really good at that. These cars were 90 horsepower on a good day with a tailwind. And they went out the door at 190 horsepower. So they were, this was a fine ride. The BMW 6 cylinders were great candidates for turbocharging. We sold a lot of kits to do-it-yourselfers around the world who were devoted to their VW. They weren't even called Golfs at this time. They were called Rabbits. But in the new building, we could really get serious. You know, we could create engines from the ground up. And that's a good example. That's the Callaway Indianapolis engine, a little 2.6-liter V8 that had to make 720 horsepower on alcohol. And we built that from scratch in less than a year. There she is. I don't know who that guy is. So now we get to the meat of the matter. How did Alfa and Callaway get connected? This is the cover shot of the brochure that Alfa produced for the project. There you had a big problem. 1982, 3, something like that. Remember the Maserati V-Turbo? Yeah. That was sort of eating the lunch of the GTV, even though it wasn't a good car. Like Jay Leno said, the only thing that still worked in the Maserati was the clock. But the folks at Alfa were, declining sales, felt that the Maserati was a threat. The engineering department in Milan couldn't react fast enough. And so Don Black, the head of engineering, came to me because he had had some experience with one of our VW customers out in Detroit. And he said, could we make a dose of horsepower to Alfa standards, test it and prove it that way, go through emission compliance, make a small run of automobiles sort of on demand, and could we get it done in less than a year? And oh, by the way, we've got no budget. So the objective in being a specialist manufacturer of things like turbocharger conversions is that you want to get connected to an original equipment manufacturer. You need that level of authorization. And if you all review your history going through the builders of good automobiles that you admire, you know that every OE has a relationship with a specialist. Alfa, Auto Delta, Jaguar, Lister, Mini, Cooper, BMW, Alpina, Mercedes, now, AMG, thanks. there will be several pauses in this presentation as my memory tries to catch up. So it was their idea. They knew what standards they wanted to meet. They knew the timing, and we took the challenge. We really wanted that OE relationship. So it turned out to be a nice looking set of hardware. I think that's always important. When you open the hood, you have to say, hey, this is cool. Our concern was about reliability. We were misinformed about Alfa being low on the scale of reliability. That really wasn't the case, but as you may remember, that was the reputation. But during the 9 months of run-up to being ready to produce vehicles, we had been through enough testing to satisfy ourselves that this was a really good engine. Enough engineering headroom to do what we wanted to do. This is a funny story. Maybe some of you know it already. But this was before Photoshop. And if you wanted to make the image of a smoking wheel, the photographer had to create that in a still setting. He wasn't going to light up the tires in the studio. And these guys did a great job of coming up with the idea of cotton balls,
That's a good idea.
artfully arranged around the side of the car. And notice that one wheel is jacked up, the other rear wheel is jacked up too. And you know that if you turn the other wheel clockwise, the wheel you're looking at goes counterclockwise, right? Just with somebody doing it by hand. But it was enough to give a little blur to the spokes. I mean, that's the end result, is that the wheel looks like it's moving, right? But in order to keep those cotton balls sort of in aggregate, you know what the secret was? Hairspray. Yeah. I thought that was very clever. That's what it takes. It's a pain in the ass to take the engine out of the car, make it all look good where nobody's even going to look, and then spend hours photographing it. I mean, it's a project. But sort of worthwhile, I think. That's what they really wrote. And in our shop, we built the cars 2 at a time. And it was one man doing the whole assembly on the whole automobile. From the machine work to the, he was given a roll-around cart with all the parts on it. And it was his job to get the car done within 2.5 day period. And in case you ever decide you want to build automobiles, my first advice would be don't. And my second would be make sure you understand all of the things that you're going to have to do, like an instruction manual. I mean, that's a job for about a year for somebody who's really good as an artist, as a writer, as a technical writer. That's a lot. Where is Mr. Sproul?
How's that?
Yeah, I thought you'd like that.
Yeah.
Halfway through the project, management at Alfa said to us, we can't sell these cars to our dealers. It would be against our business model. So what we want you to do is buy all the cars, and you sell them to the dealers. Boy, this is going from bad. So I think your dad I probably, bought and sold cars from each other to get you some inventory.
I remember that car.
You remember?
I own that car.
Had a lot of fun in that car.
Really?
Yeah.
That's yours, Mark?
Yeah.
You're a man of great taste.
11.
That's one of them.
I love the prices.
Yeah, that was used.
Okay. An awful lot of people have had a car like this in the family, and it's really become a part of the family. That's why it's special. Do you know these folks? Yeah. The Comers? Yeah. And his family. I think that's probably car number 1, or close. It's really hard to know the numbering of the cars. I should make that clear up front. We didn't, this was 1983, 84. We didn't have computers. Well, we had those ones that printed on the green and white stripe paper. Tractor feed. But we didn't know about writing down the details of each car. We just thought, but our job was to get the cars out the door. Let Alfa figure out the clerical aspect. So we didn't have the tools to do a good job. Oh, I wanted to spend a minute talking about this because I've spent the last year and a half tracking down all 35 or 6 of the cars. And it's been a fascinating mystery to finally uncover ownership and whereabouts and prior owners. And, each car has now had several owners, and keeping track of where they are, where they've been, pictures of men, women who own the cars, and putting it all into a file that can be searched and is a relational database. It is a big job. But we had to do this for General Motors, which came after Alfa. And then going back and doing it for Alfa, we sort of fit the Alfas into that format. And now we have good records and good contact with anybody who's still talking to us. I don't know if you can see the kind of record keeping that goes into it, but everything's based on the VIN number. Then we can see states and emails and whether the car is up to date or not, or whether nobody ever knew where it was. I think we're only missing probably 2, but not knowing where did they go. Some of the cars rusted to death. Some of the cars crashed to death. Some of the cars burned to death. So I never thought it would be such an interesting story, but it has really turned out to be. So if anybody ever finds a car that they're interested in, they're welcome to call in, and we'll share whatever we know. That's what a car record looks like. The ownership side of it related to. So if you click that little arrow, it'll take you to the car related to the owner. And so that's what the car side of the record looks like. That's Val Herrera. And he didn't have his younger and thinner filter on. Is that your buddy?
Not mine.
Leslie Hill, car number 5. Everybody seems to want a certificate of authenticity, so we priced it at half of what Porsche charges, and now everybody has it. A certificate of authenticity, notice, doesn't contain any name of owner. It is much more a birth certificate for the car, not related to the owner, so that the certificate is passed to new owners without being duplicated. That shot of the cover of the Alfa brochure, we turned it into a shop banner. Most shop banners are real trash. 5 years later, they're all falling apart and fade. These are really nicely done. So, if anybody has room in their shop for a nice, unique Alfa banner, they can call and order one of those. Oops, sorry. The Deviuses, I think. Yeah. And here's Tom. What's Tom's last name? Gillis. Tom is on his way down here now. Just a little behind schedule. After we're done in here, we can go downstairs and hopefully there'll be 2 nice twin turbos there for everybody to look at. One, of course, is Mark's car, a beauty. Yeah. 3. No?
Can we drive this?
Val's car did very well at the Concorso a couple of years ago. So we have now reached after Alta.
Is there really an after Alpha?
But I think this crowd really likes mechanical endeavors. So here's my report to you. We achieved getting an OE relationship with Alfa. They decided to close Alfa North America at the moment that we had produced the 35th car. So we didn't have any choice about going forward. We were sitting in Connecticut, completely devoted to getting the Alfas out the door. And now the main customer goes away with no warning. What do you do? What? Had all the people, all the machinery, all of the overhead in place, and no problem. The Alfa got swept up. One of the Alfas, who was the Detroit dealer? It was a pretty good dealer in Detroit. Pardon?
Yeah, it's suburban.
Callaway, what time frame are you talking? What years? For the dealer in Detroit?
83, 4, 5.
Was that sports cars bibs
Right,
at the time?
right. Nice work.
Bought a car from there.
Good. You know, General Motors runs a war room, studying every competitive automobile in every set that they make automobiles. Yeah. The Alfa got bought by GM and brought in for testing, unbeknownst to us. We no idea. Just random. We got a call after the testing was concluded and said, hey, we have this little 2.5-liter twin turbocharged front engine rear transaxle coupe here that's a dead ringer for a 1985 Corvette, performance-wise. Same 0 to 60, same. Yeah. How did you do that? Would you be interested in working on the Corvette doing something similar. If you would consider building the automobiles, we'll sell them at Chevy dealers for you. I said, wow, this is the call you wait for in this business. But as you can see, it was completely luck and timing. It was not, nobody pitched them, nobody whispered in their ear this would be a good idea. This was the idea of Dave McClellan, the chief engineer of General Motors, the guy who replaced Zora Duntov. And thank God he thought that way. Because, we are, like it or not, and I think you can tell from my story, we were not Corvette fans or participants or enthusiasts at all. We were headed strictly down the European path because of the engineering quality. But we made the deal with General Motors, and it was done on a handshake. There's never been a contract. There still isn't a contract, and here we are 40 years later, 45 years later, doing essentially the same thing, except on the whole line of General Motors automobiles. So, rather be lucky than smart. But a couple of other things happened along the way. Oops. You're gonna like this.
What is speed? Is it 0 to 60 in 2.7 seconds? Is it being low to the ground, slippery, and cutting through the air like a knife? Or maybe it's 757 horsepower, blasting you down the track like a bat out of hell. Let's agree on two things. Speed is what gets you there faster, and speed always leaves a smile on your face. This is Speed, high performance car care from Mothers.
Now, that's a good ad.
Yes, it is.
My son Pete was doing the driving, not the acting, just the driving part. So those were some big smiles that day. I don't know if any of you are golfers, but I engineered the golf clubs for my dad, who had started Callaway Golf back in the day. We were always thinking that we were sort of getting him off my back by helping him with the golf clubs. We never thought it would go anywhere. I remember him walking back into the house one day with an armful of golf clubs that he hadn't sold at his normal rounds. And I said, Pop, I don't think this whole golf thing's going to go I don't know if you know or not, but Callaway Golf is the largest manufacturer of sporting equipment in the world. Not just golf. Remember when Wilson was making tennis rackets, and golf clubs and stuff like that? There's a lot of room for improvement. Oh, I don't know, sorry about that. Do you remember the popularity of top speed testing for magazines? Fastest in the land. Every year there was always 5 or 10 crazies who would try to run for top speed. And every year we were building a different car because just because. And it costs about $1 million every year to build a car, go test it, make sure that you can hand the keys over to a journalist and he won't kill himself. But still, it was $1 million out the door. I told Dave McClellan at General Motors, I said, hey, why don't we just build one car? And because it's turbocharged, we'll just adjust the boost pressure to make the car always win whatever event it's at. But we'll never show its full hand, right? So we did that. That's what the sledgehammer is. And we were lucky we didn't kill ourselves. What was the point? The point was, we had to figure out if our calculations were right. We calculated the car would go 250 miles an hour. That was the goal. So we take it out to Transportation Research Center in Ohio and do a graduated approach to getting up to that speed. And right about the middle of the testing, we were having some misfire kind of trouble. And it was getting longer and longer and longer, and the weather was going to hell in a handbasket. And our other big client was Aston Martin. We were building the engines for the Group C car, as well as for the Mirage speed car, engines that we designed. And I had to go. I had to be in England. And my friend John Lingenfelter, who was near the Ohio test track, stepped in and was very brave. He did the driving, and I got a call while in England, and they said, hey, we went 254.76 miles an hour. Is that fast enough? And I said, is everybody still above ground? Bring it home. So instead of putting it in a trailer and bringing it home, they drove it home. I thought it was a great idea because it was raining, and you know, we got all the B-roll that you need to say, hey, it really was driven home. So our objective was to make a car that worked, not a thinly disguised race car, but a car that really worked the way you would expect, you know, something eventually like the Bugatti to work. That's what this did. We thought we were doing an engineering exercise here. We didn't really realize how many influences there would be on young men as they grew up, thinking about this as some sort of high watermark that they would like to become involved in. So that was a great project in retrospect. In actually doing it, it almost killed us all. Sorry. I'm moving the wrong way. So as you can tell, the end game in this business is to build your own automobile. It's one thing to modify someone else's. There's a lot of wisdom to that because nobody can afford to build their own automobile. At least not someone my back. But I didn't know that in 1992. And we did. We built the Callaway C7 as our first complete automobile, not related at all to a Corvette. First production car that we know of that had a carbon fiber monocoque chassis. It has a deeply offset front engine and a transaxle and a very nice shape. On the grid at Le Mans with this car, Gordon Murray came up to me and said, you know, that's really a good looking car, much better looking than the McLaren. That came from Gordon.
I remember.
Does anybody speak German? Yeah. No? Good. Because there's an expression in German which is printed at the bottom of the page. It says, meine eierlegende Wollmilchsau. Yeah? That means my egg-laying, wool-producing, and milk-making pig. In other words, all things to all people. When they put us on the cover of Auto Week, they translated it into English, which makes no sense. So I photoshopped in the right words. Don't report it. So you can imagine the ton of press that the twin turbo Corvettes generated. I forgot this was in here. This is back at the house. That's Pete, probably 5 years old, 4 years old. I built that thing a couple of nights before Christmas. The radius of the hoop there is the radius of a 55-gallon fuel drum. I wanted him to get the feeling of steering something rather than the feeling of balancing on a bicycle.
Oh.
So, I have to cut this short because there's actually too much material to try to cover in between. We can come back into any of it you want, but out of courtesy, I just want to draw to a conclusion here by telling you what I am up to and what men that I work with are up to. You know, we're in a crisis. Fuel consumption, global warming, emissions, and a big contributor to that are airlines. I'm involved with a startup for making the future airlines, and they look like this. This is called a blended wing body, BWB, and these are large aircraft, 150, 225, 280, 320 passenger. We're about 8 years away from certification. We're flying the models now. And the best and brightest men in the aerospace industry, who are all the battle scars of having been there at Boeing, been there at Embraer, been there at Bombardier, have left their jobs to join us. Being built in Long Beach. 8 years away from certification and a few $1 billion away in terms of funds to be raised. I'm particularly interested in talking to anybody who wants to fund this kind of project. Doesn't it? 35% better fuel mileage, just because the whole aircraft is a lifting line, not just a wing. With the engines mounted on top, it's about a third quieter. It's remarkable to see it fly because you can't hear it. It starts on Jet A for now, but it will be hydrogen ready by the time we reach the finish line. So it stands a chance of being the first emission-free, zero carbon, international transport. Trouble is, when you say that you're going to be a competitor for Boeing and Airbus, people sort of turn and go the other way. This is a giant job. But I figure I have about one rodeo left, and I'd like to be involved with that. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think that my message is largely done. I'd love to have anybody who wants to join us downstairs in front of the car.